My name is Natalie. I'm 34, and I'm the founder and principal of a design build renovation firm that closed last year at $3.4 million in revenue. I was disowned by my own family at 25, cut off completely, no calls, no holidays, nothing, while I was quietly building a company that would one day be worth more than the house they eventually tried to steal from me. Right now, somewhere in Millbrook Ridge, Ohio, my cousin Brianna is standing in our grandfather's living room telling a room full of strangers that the house is basically sold, while a real estate agent named Marcus Feld is pulling up the listing history on his laptop that's about to prove she's lying to every single person in that room. I'll get to that. But first, if you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now, and hit subscribe, because you're going to want to see how this ends. Let me take you back to where it started. My grandfather, Walter Hendricks, bought the house at 214 Birchwood Lane in Millbrook Ridge in 1979 for $34,000. By the time I was a kid, it was worth close to $400,000, and by the time this story happened, it was appraised at $1.2 million. Grandpa Walter raised two daughters, my mother, Carol, and my Aunt Denise, Brianna's mother. Aunt Denise's family got the good china, the beach trips, the cosign cars. My mother's side, mine, got invited to Thanksgiving and not much else. Brianna is 2 years older than me, and growing up, she was the one Grandpa Walter called the smart one at every single family dinner, even after I graduated top of my class in structural engineering from Ohio State in 2014. I didn't resent her for it back then. I just noticed it. The break happened on September 8th, 2017. I was 25, working my second year at a construction firm downtown, living in a 600 square foot apartment on Delridge Avenue, saving every dollar I could. Brianna had just opened a boutique clothing store in Millbrook Ridge that was already bleeding money 4 months in, and my Aunt Denise called a family meeting at my grandfather's kitchen table, the one with the yellow Formica top and the chip in the corner near the sugar bowl, and asked me to co-sign a $180,000 business loan for Brianna's store. I said no. Not a soft no. A clear one. I told them I'd looked at Brianna's business plan, that the numbers didn't work, that co-signing meant I'd be personally liable for $180,000 I didn't have. My Aunt Denise stood up so fast her chair scraped against the linoleum, and she looked at me and said, "You've always thought you were better than this family, and now you've proven it." My grandfather didn't say a word. He just looked down at his coffee. My mother stayed quiet too, which told me everything about where her loyalty would land if it ever came down to a choice. 3 weeks later, I got a text from my mother that said we needed space. I didn't cry. I remember standing in my kitchen at 9:40 p.m., reading that text, and just feeling strangely still, like something had finally been confirmed instead of broken. I didn't beg. I didn't send a follow-up text explaining myself. I just said, okay. And I put my phone face down on the counter. The person who caught me that year was my boss, Diane Castellano, the founding partner at the firm where I worked. Diane wasn't family, but she noticed I'd stopped mentioning holidays, and one Friday in November she handed me a set of keys to her lake house in Sandusky and said, "You're not spending Thanksgiving alone, and that's not a request." Diane became the person who taught me how to read a P&L statement, how to negotiate a contract, how to build something that couldn't be taken from me by a family vote. Year 1, I worked 80-hour weeks and started a folder on my laptop labeled documentation, every email, every text, every voicemail from that period, saved without even knowing why yet. Year 2, I got licensed as a general contractor. Year 3, I left Diane's firm and started my own Hendricks & Cole design build with 2 employees and a used pickup truck. Year 5, we hit $1.1 million in annual revenue. Year 7, $2.6 million. Year 9, $3.4 million, 41 employees, and a second office in Columbus. In all that time, I got exactly one message from my family, a text from Aunt Denise in year 4, asking if I could help out with a $9,000 gap in Brianna's store finances. I didn't answer. Later I heard she told people she'd sent me a birthday card that year that I never acknowledged. I never received a birthday card. The reconnection came in year 9, in February, 3 weeks after my grandfather had a stroke. My mother called me. The first call in 9 years and 3 months, and her voice was warm in a way that felt rehearsed. She said Grandpa Walter had been asking for me. When I visited him at Millbrook General, he squeezed my hand and said I should have said something that day, which was the closest thing to an apology I ever got from him. He passed on June 2nd at 87 years old. At the reading of his will 2 weeks later, the attorney, a woman named Priya Anand, confirmed that Grandpa Walter's estate, including the house on Birchwood Lane, was to be split evenly between my mother and Aunt Denise, with a clause stating any sale of the property required agreement from both daughters and, notably, a separate clause naming me as successor trustee if either daughter was unable or unwilling to act in good faith. Nobody in the room seemed to register that second clause. I did. 2 days after the reading, my cousin's fiancé accidentally left his phone unlocked at a family lunch I'd been invited to for the first time in years, and I saw a group chat notification light up the screen. A message from Brianna to Aunt Denise that read, "Just tell everyone Grandpa verbally promised me the house before he died. Nobody's going to fight us on it. We need to list it before Aunt Carol changes her mind." I didn't say anything that day. I photographed the screen, added it to my folder, and drove straight to Priya's office the next morning to ask what my rights actually were as successor trustee. Priya explained that if Brianna attempted to sell or represent herself as sole owner without both daughters' documented consent, it would constitute a breach the trustee clause allowed me to intervene on. 3 weeks later, Brianna scheduled an open house for July 19th at 214 Birchwood Lane, listing it through an agent she'd hired herself, without my mother's signature anywhere on the paperwork. I found out because Priya's office flagged the listing. I arrived at 214 Birchwood Lane at 1:15 p.m. on July 19th. The smell hit me before anything else, my grandfather's pipe tobacco still somehow lingering in the curtains, mixed with the fresh coffee someone had brewed to stage the kitchen. There were maybe a dozen prospective buyers walking through the living room, and Brianna, in a cream blazer, was telling a couple by the fireplace that the house was practically under contract already. We're just finalizing paperwork. That's when I saw Marcus Feld, an older real estate agent I recognized immediately. He'd been my grandfather's agent back in 2011, when Grandpa Walter had briefly listed the house during a health scare before deciding to keep it. Marcus had come as a courtesy walkthrough for a different buyer, and when he heard Brianna's claim, he pulled out his laptop right there in the dining room and pulled up the archived MLS listing history from 2011. The private agent remarks, still on file, read almost verbatim. Seller has specified in writing that any future sale of this property must include his daughter Carol Hendricks as a named party, due to prior family dispute. Seller does not authorize sole representation by any other family member. Grandpa Walter had documented it 8 years before he died, quietly, without ever telling either of us. Brianna's face went white. For 1 second, just one, I saw something real in her, something that looked like fear, maybe even shame, standing there in front of strangers in the house she'd grown up believing was owed to her. "I didn't fake anything," she said, quieter now. I thought if I said it enough times, it would become true." Then, just as fast, she straightened her blazer and told the room the listing was outdated paperwork, and everyone should ignore it. But the buyers were already exchanging glances and heading for the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just opened my folder, the physical binder I'd finally printed everything into, and set it on my grandfather's dining table, the trustee documentation on top. "You don't get to write the ending to someone else's story just because you said it out loud first," I told her. The sale fell apart within the hour. Aunt Denise, facing the trustee clause and Priya's letter, agreed to a court-supervised sale with proceeds split as the will actually dictated. Brianna's boutique closed for good that October. Not because of me, but because the loan she'd eventually gotten from someone else finally came due. My mother, for her part, sent me a long, honest text that same night admitting she'd stayed silent too many times and asked if we could start over slowly. I left that door open. We talk now, carefully most Sundays. If any part of this is hitting close to home, drop a comment. I read every one. Here's what I know now that I didn't know at 25. Silence from people who are supposed to love you isn't punishment, it's information. My family didn't lose the house because I fought for it. They lost it because a man they underestimated for 8 years told the truth in writing before any of us thought to ask him to. I didn't need to raise my voice at that open house because the paper trail had already said everything I needed it to say. If you like this video, hit subscribe for more stories like Natalie's, drop a comment below, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I'll see you in the next one.